Yo, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Street Coder Nate, and today what we're gonna talk about is pretty much JavaScript syntax. Everything that we talked about over the last few videos, we're gonna group it all together and actually get onto the computer today and give those examples. After that, we on to coding for real. So we're about to see how we do it, and then we're about to really just put it into play afterwards. So let's get into it. Here we go. So what you see here is that I have on this side right here. On that side, I have the index.js file, and then on the right hand side, what you see is that I have a Chrome browser open with the developer tools open. So how did I open that? I opened up my project, and then I just right clicked, inspect, and there you go. Open this double chevron and go to console, and now you see loaded. Index.js printed out loaded. So if we come to our file right here, we see, let me move myself and come to our file, we gonna see that index.js simply does say console.log loaded. Okay, well, we in the last few videos, what did we talk about? Well, the first thing we talked about was variables, right? And so variables and data types. Okay, so remember I said that the way that we declare variables in JavaScript is using the keyword let or using the keyword const, like this. And after we use those keywords, we have to give an identifier. We need to a reference to what the data is going to be. So you typically want to give your identifier some name that really describes the data that it's referring to. And so I'm going to give this variable name number. And then you want to assign it to a value. Now you don't have to assign it to a value. You can just, let's say, reserve that space. And so what you would say is let number, right? And you will reserve the space like declaring a variable. But if you actually wanted to set it equal to a value, you say 06 like that. And so, my bad, can barely see. There you go. So let's say, there you go. You got your let and then you got your number 06. Cool. And so let allows us, well, let me try another one. So let's go number, let's make this consistent consistent number, and then we're going to turn this one to 06 as well. And so what we're going to do is try to, what's the difference between let and const, right? They both create variables. Well, let allows us, it says, I'm going to let you change the value of this variable. Well, const says this variable's value is consistent and you will not be able to change it. And so I can come down here and say number equals 7, and then try to say consistent number number equals 8, like that. And I come back over here to the browser and I reload the page, and here we got uncaught type error, assignment to constant variable at index.js. So what does that mean? That means we try to reassign a value to a consistent variable. So let's say if I take this out like that, and then I refresh the page, bang, we're good. So I can reset number to be 7, but I can't reset that consistent number. That's key. Cool. All right, so we got our variables there. All right, so let's talk about different data types. So let's go const, or let's go, we'll do lets for now. Let, so you already saw a number. Creating a number is real easy. Just set it equal to a number, right? There's this other value called null. Remember, I showed you what null is. Null is simply saying that inside it's that this number is pointing to a box that has no data inside of it. And then no data doesn't mean like an empty string, like a string that has nothing in it, or a 0. No data means that in that box, if we went to that location, there would be nothing there. It would just be spent empty space, just air, pretty much. That's what null means. And so you can set values to null, and we use null to check different situations, like stopping situations and parsing and different things like that. Therefore, we're just not going to use null right now because we don't really find any use case for it, but that's how we would create a null value. Okay. Let's go with a string. So we're gonna call this my name, right? And so, or we could just call it name. And we will set name equal to, what I like to do is double quotes, and we will just say Nate like this, right? And so we can console.log Nate and or name like this. And so what this will do is allow me to print out my name to the console. So if I refresh the page, Nate gets printed out. I don't know if there's a line through here. Const deprecate. Name is deprecated. Okay. My name. There we go. And I guess I was using the keyword in JavaScript. Don't use the keywords. Okay, cool. So I let name equals Nate. That's what that equals. And then I can reset my name. Let's go. My name equals like Christian, like that. Right. So now if I come here, I refresh the page. Now my name is Christian. So you see in here that I'm resetting values. I'm setting values and resetting values. You saw me do it for number and string. What else do we have in JavaScript? We also have, I always want to say const. We also have arrays, or we also have Boolean values. So with our Boolean values, the typical names that we give them is something like is red, is green, or is on. And then what you would do is like, let's say is on, and we'll set it equal to false. And so this is would typically be like used for a flag. And so like this is on, you would check like if is on, right? Because you can use those conditions, right? So you say if is on, so you could be referring to like a light or something. If the light is on, turn, and then what we can do inside the if statement is turn the light off, right? So we can go ahead and let's say is on. Let's print that one out and see what happens with that one. Oops, put a new tab. And you see the keyword false gets printed out. And so we can change is on to equal as well true. And now when we come over here, you see true is there as well. Cool. So those are the Boolean values. Let's try the array. And so typically people put ARR for array, or you name your array whatever the array is holding. And so to create an empty array is something like this. Create an empty array. Let's refresh the page. Cool. There are no values in this array. You see that it has a property length of 0. So now let's say if I created an array with one value in it, with one value, and I know that one was probably gonna throw y'all off, but one value in it. So right now I have an array with that holds the value 2. What happens when I print it out? You will see that 2 is here, and it'll show you that at index 0 you have the value 2, and that the length of the array is 1. Cool. All right. So what if I put another value in here, let's say 6. Let's try it out one more time. You see now that in the browser we get our let me bring myself up here. In the browser we get the two values right there, 2 and 6. And once we open up 2 and 6, what we see is that 2 and 6 is we got at index 0 is 2, at index 1 is 6, and then at the length is 2. So we are doing exactly what we need to do right there when it comes to arrays. So what you see with arrays is that once again the index starts at 0 and then goes on. It also has a length property, and that you can put things into arrays like this. Now you can update your array later on. Let's say you wanted to add another value to your array. Well, arrays have a lot of different what we call methods added onto them, and so use Visual Studio Code and it will give you a lot of hints to these methods, or just Google them and say array special methods. But what I would like to do, like, you got all these methods. You can concatenate things, you can copy, you can filter, you can find within inside the array. So find me the index where 2 is at, or you can ask it if 2 is included inside of the array and stuff. So there's a lot of different methods and different things that you can add. The one that I'm looking for is push. Push allows you to add a value into the array like that. And so I'm gonna push 3 in, and now let's see what our array looks like. See, our array is of 3 values. We got 2, 6, and 3. At index 0 is 2, at index 1 is 6, and at index 2, or Index 0 is 2, at index 1 is 6, and at index 2 there's 3. Cool. So we're seeing how we do in arrays. Cool. And we're going to get more into all those other functions in arrays in a few other videos, right? So let's also check out, there's one more thing I was telling y'all on data types was objects. So let's obj equal an object like this. And so remember I was telling y'all to create JavaScript objects, you put the curly brackets like that. And so we're going to print out the object. This is just an empty object. So let's see what an empty object looks like in a browser. All it is just some curly brackets right now. And then it says prototype object. Cool. Okay, well, how do we fill out this object? When I was telling y'all that objects are made of key value pairs. Made up of key value pairs like this. And so I created this syntax like this because this is pretty much what the syntax looks like in JavaScript. On the left hand side, so pretty much this object, and in some languages you will hear it called as a dictionary, because if you think about it, in a dictionary you look up a value, you look up a word, and then you get the definition for that word. And so with objects and maps in dictionaries, you create the key. The key is typically, let's say in a dictionary, the word that we're looking up, and then the value is like that definition. And so let's create our key value pairs. And so let's actually make this a person object. Let's go person and object. And let's say that this object was describing a person, right? And so we can say his name is Nate, like that. You can give it the height, because remember, objects help us represent real world things, real world objects inside of our computer. And so I'm trying to represent a real world human object named Nate with a height of let's go 5'11", like that. And then what else? Color, black. Shout out to the homeland. And then let's just go school, UMich, job, Microsoft, something like that, right? And so now you see that I have this person object, and when I do print out this person object, as I was printing out other objects, what you'll see, what you see right now is a uncaught reference to obj is not defined. So that's a really good syntax error. So remember, syntax is the rules of the language. And so basically this is saying that on line 10, I'm trying to print out I'm trying to console.log this value called obj, but obj does not exist anywhere in my project. Now person obj does, but not obj. So what I need to do is update obj to be person obj. And now when I refresh the browser, you see that I get my object printed out. So this is what my object looks like when I print it out. You see my colors, black, my height is 5'11", my job is Microsoft, my name is Nate, and my school is UMich. Now, I can go even deeper into my object and use this dot operator. And remember, when we used the dot operator on the array, we was given all those what are those, purple or pink light colors. And we were given blue colors. Well, those purple pink light colors inside of Visual Studio is telling you that these are methods on the array. And the blue color right here is telling us that these are properties, these are attributes that describe, right now for me, this object that I'm calling person object. But if it was the array, it would be the properties of the array. And so here we just see blue because all I made was properties. I didn't make any methods inside of my object. But what you'll see in a second is that I will. And so what if I just wanted to print out my name? Well, I'll go to the person's object and I'll use the dot operator. The dot operator gives me access to the methods and the attributes / properties of a class object thing, right? So let's print out my name. And so what it will do is person object dot name, and that gives me access to my name. And so if I refresh this, I get Nate. And I can even go a little fancier. and say something like this. And this is called string concatenation. And the way that you do string concatenation in JavaScript, I'm gonna teach y'all the fun way and not any other way right now, is using these things called backticks. And your backticks are to the left of your number one, right? And so you can start writing just regular string text, right? If I write regular string text like this, the name of the person is, well, and then I'll just do that. This string text just like this, let me take this out and put it right here. This string text, this is called an anonymous string, and the reason that it's called an anonymous string is because it's not, there's no reference to this string. This string just exists. There's no variable pointing to this string. And so if I just put this string right inside console.log, all this is doing is saying, I need you to print out this string that's not really referenced to anything. This it's a literal string is what other people call it. Just print out this literal string. But right now I'm using anonymous because we're going to get into functions, and you can say a literal function or an anonymous function, and more people understand anonymous functions. And so this is what you call a literal string, and so, or anonymous string. You can also have an anonymous number. You can have anonymous an array that's anonymous, as well as an object that's anonymous, and you can print out all of these. You can print out all of this stuff as well, right? And so these are anonymous, right? And so you just print them out. You don't have to save them into variables. And so that's what I'm doing here, is just saying I'm printing out this anonymous string. The name of the person is. And so, but the reason I use backticks is because I want to show you this syntax where you put $, curly brackets, and this is like it's called interpolation. And what happens is this allows us to do to write a string like this, but allow us to grab variable names now. So I have person object. So what if I want to print out the person object dot name like this? So now this gives me the opportunity to say, just as a regular string, the name of the person is, and then I can go person object, yada, yada. And then I can just go, period, isn't that really cool? I can just continue my string. And so if I come over here and refresh, the name of the person is Nate. Isn't that really cool? Or isn't that really cool? And now we have that over here in the browser. So that's string, and what we call that is concatenation. We're concatenating multiple strings together, as this is a string, this is that part right there is the string literal, this is a string variable, and then we can keep it connecting it to another string literal right here, and all together this is one string literal, honestly. So that's strings and printing out string literals, as well as adding in like objects and stuff like that. You can do the same thing for arrays and all other type of variables as well. Like I had, let's just say I had a const array, and I didn't even teach you how to take things out the array. So const array, and let's just say array, and it has a whole bunch of names, Nate, Kari, so something like that. All right, cool. So what if I wanted to print out one of these names? Well, remember, I can grab my variable right here, array, inside of here, and the way that we print out the name is by using the square bracket operator. And we saw how in the browser, when we printed out array, it had like index 0 had this value, index 1 had this value. Well, with arrays, we use the square bracket operator, and then we give it the index that the index where the value that we want to print out. And so let's say I want to print out the Kari name. Well, we know that the index starts at 0. So Nate is at index 0, the Kari is at index 1, and Slope is at index 2. So let's print out the Kari name, which is at index 1. And you see over here now, the name's the Kari. So this is how you get values out of arrays. Cool. So we've covered all the data types right now. And now let's get into operators, right? But operators, I was telling you about the operators, like, and what we're gonna do is actually just create a couple variables, so consts, and they're just gonna be numbers, and we're gonna say num1, and we're gonna make that equal to 6, and then we're gonna say const num2 is equal to 20. And what we're going to do is come down here and write these conditionals, or and write these operators. And so we're going to have console.log, and we have these operators. And what we're going to do is log out what these operators evaluate to. So remember, we have first we have these mathematical operators. So let's do the addition one. So let's just do a string concatenation. So what we'll do here is say num1 is less than, or num1 plus num2 equals, and what we'll do is do right here, remember we could say $ curly bracket, and now we can grab our variable names inside of the string, and we could also run JavaScript as well. So we'll say num1, and then we'll do plus num2. Look how I'm doing that right here. And now when I come back over here and I refresh, we got num1 plus num2 equals 26. And that makes sense. Okay, let's get the rest of these operators, right? So do a few more. We got minus, and then we're gonna put a minus right here. We got plus, and so we'll put, or we got multiply, so we'll put a multiplication sign here. We got division, so we'll put a division sign here. And then on this one, we got the modulus, so we'll put the modulus sign here. And let's refresh, and here we go. So num1 plus num2 is 26. Num1 minus num2 is negative 24 or negative 14. Num1 plus num2 or times num2 is 120. Num1 divided by num2 is 0.3, and num1 mod num2 is 6. Now, if you need to go check out what those operators mean, go back to the videos, but these are the operators in use, right? Okay, so those were the mathematical operators. Mathematical operators. Okay, mathematical operators. But now let's get into the logical operators. Remember, logical operators really help us make logical decisions in our code. So let's take one of these examples again, and let's do, instead of plus, let's do num1 is less than num2. And so we can do that right here, and let's see what's printed out when we do that. Num1 is less than num2 is true. That's what printed out, equals true. Cool. All right, let's do a few more. So we got less than, let's do less than or equal to right there. Less than or equal to. Let's do greater than here. Let's do greater than or equal to right there. And so we'll put greater than or equal to. Let's do they equal each other, so triple equal. And we're gonna do that here. And then let's also put they don't equal each other, so not equal, like that. Cool. All right, refresh the page. And now let's go check out our logical operators down here. We got num1 is less than num1 is less than num2 is true. Num1 is less than or equal to num2 is true. Num1 is greater than num2 is false. Num1 is greater than or equal to num2 is false. Num1 is equal to num2 is false, and num1 doesn't equal num2 is true. So these are all our operators in work. I'm showing y'all how to do it real quick. This is real quick JavaScript. Now, remember with our operators, what were we able to do with our operators, right? With our operators, we were able to make decisions, right? So this was called, and what this is called is conditions, or flow control, my bad. Controlling the flow of the program. Flow control. And so I always tell people about flow control. Flow control, you got a whole bunch of energy in you, and you need to really control where this energy go, the flow of that energy, pretty much. You got a whole bunch of energy in your computer, you got to control that flow of energy. And that's what this is. And so the way that we control the flow of energy is with if statements. And so this is the syntax for an if condition. And so this part in the middle is the condition. And so what's the word? Visual Studio Code helped us out and given us the basic syntax for if statement. So the condition though, it becomes one of these one of these conditions where num1 is less than num2. And so let's try that. That's a condition that we can check. And if statements are always checking, always checking if conditions are always checking true or false. Remember that? And so num1 is less than num2 is going to evaluate to something. And so if it evaluates true, then we're going to go inside these curly brackets right here. And so, and then we'll run the commands inside those curly brackets. So let's just run this command, console.log, and we'll say num1 is less than num2. And then if that's not true, we'll say this else case, else. And so if that part, if num1 isn't less than num2, then this less, or this else comes, and then we can print then we can say num1 is, or num2 is greater than num1, like that. And so now we can refresh the page over here, and what we see is num1 is less than num2. Can we confirm that? Num1 is 6, num2 is 20. So when we come here at our if statement and we say, how I like to read this is, I like to go, is num1 less than num2? If this is true, then I read, okay, if true. And I know if true comes into this statement, and then false comes into this statement. So what you want to first do is evaluate this. Evaluate your condition. Your condition is going to always come to true or false. So you got num1 is less than num2. That is a true condition. We're going to come into here. Let's make num1 26. And now when we refresh the page, num2 is greater than num1. And that is because num1 is 26 less than 20. That's false. So this if block, or the block inside the if, isn't going to run. What's going to run is the else block, which says num2 is greater than num1. Oh wait, num1 is greater than num2, my bad. And we refresh the page, and num1 is greater than num2. Cool. All right, so that's our if condition. But remember, I was telling you that we can change, that our conditions, that this is just the beginning of making decisions. We can chain multiple conditions together by using and or. Just like as if we speak in our conversation, if this condition is true and this condition is true, I need you to do this, right? And so what I'm going to say is if num1 is less than num2, or let's say less than or equal to num2, that's going to be true. Let's make that true. And then, so let's make this 20 pretty much. So what I'm about to say is if num1 is less than or equal to num2, and num1 doesn't equal num2. So basically, this is basically saying less than. I'm creating a less than operation. I could have just said less than, right? But no, that I didn't want to do that. And so if I do that, I'm just going to say num1 is greater than num2, or they equal. And so now if I run it, and over here we see num1 is greater than num2, or they equal. And so you see they're equal right now. But if I make num1 19, and come over here, num1 is less than num2, because num1 is less than num2 runs first. This condition runs first, and we see that in that condition is true. Num1 is less than or equal to num2. That's right. Num1 is less than or equal to num2. Cool. And then we run this condition after evaluating that to true. So we got num1 does not equal num2. We come back up here. Num1 doesn't equal num2. Cool, that's true. So now what we got is this thing called true and true. And true always gives us true. So that's going to evaluate the true, and bang, we get that one. If you want to, the logic gets more complicated. Like as you chain more and more if conditions together, um, that true, and then you could put or as well. That becomes like real discrete math is what it really is. And so logical operators, this is really how humans think and whatnot. It's so many different conditions that we're not even thinking about that's happening, but we're really doing these if statements where multiple complicated as conditions that we're checking. So that's flow control on that. But there's another part on flow control that we like to get through, and that usually involves arrays, const array, and we'll make names actually. And names is going to equal this array, Nate, Kari, excuse me, and slope. Right, cool. We got Nate, the Kari, slope, and what I want to do is print all these names. Well, another way of flow control is called looping, because we can make the flow do multiple iterations of the same commands multiple times. And so one of the first loops that people learn is the for loop. And so this is the basic syntax for a for loop. You have your I guess first you learn your while loop. So let's learn the while loop. So what the while loop is going to check this condition, right? Just like the if statement, it's going to check a condition. And the condition is pretty much like any of these conditions up here. Any condition you can pretty much make up, right? And so what people would do here is have a thing called a counter. Let's make the counter equal 0. And so the counter, or let's make it current index, right? And so the current index is going to refer back to the names array. And so I make the current index 0. And I know I got 3 values in here. So what I want to make this condition say is if current index is less than, and I can say names dot length, right? Names dot length. So while current index is less than names dot length. Well, names dot length is 3. Current index is 0. What we want to do is do a console dot log of the names at current index. Remember, arrays take an index, and so this is our current index. So this is going to print out the name, and then we're just going to increment. Well, let's see what we do. Well, let's see what happens when we do this first, actually. And come over here, we refresh, and you see Nate is printed out a ridiculous amount of times. What's happening is called an infinite loop, because this check is always going to return back true. So therefore, this is always going to happen, and it's just going to continue happening. Why this is always going to return true is because I never incremented current index. Current index is always going to say at 0, which is why you see Nate printing out right now 1,300 times. Let's increment current index. We can say current index plus plus. It's pretty much saying current index equals current index plus 1. And now if I come over here and refresh the page, I guess they don't have plus plus. Current index plus equal 1. That's what I meant. And that's like saying, okay, they don't have that value. They don't have that. I know they have that. Current index plus equals 1. Okay, so what I guess I'm going to have to say is current index equals, I'm trying to do, what's that shit called? C++ stuff up in here. Maybe it did work. Maybe I just got to pause it. I'm refreshing. I know I'm indexing. Current index plus 1. It's still loading, that's why. Let me take this and then just go to another page. That's why you'll do infinite loops. It's not going to respond. All right, cool. And then inspect. Let's go back to the console. And now what you see is Nate the Kari slope is printed out. The other one crashed pretty much because it was an infinite loop and it wasn't responsive. Don't make infinite loops. Always increment. Oh, okay, so now let me see if my plus plus actually works. Okay, plus plus works and plus equal 1. Does that also work? Okay, cool. That's just not C++. So plus plus is pretty much saying current index equals current index plus 1, and current index plus equals 1 is also saying the same thing. I can do plus equals 2, and that will say current index plus 2, or current index equals current index plus 2. We can also turn this to a multiply sign, and this is saying current index equals current index times 2. Cool. These are little shortcuts. You can look those up. All right, so just like we could do a while loop, we could also do a thing called a for loop. And so a while loop is called a condition-based loop because it's looping based on a condition. A for loop is called, like, it's for you're looping based on a set of numbers. And so here we have let index equals 0, and you typically use a for loop and while loop to loop through arrays or do commands just multiple times that you need done multiple times. And so this says index is, so here we have our declaration, let index equals 0. That's pretty much this part here. What you can do in a while loop is the same you can do in a for loop. It just set up differently, right? And so this let index equals 0, this is synonymous to this line 23 right there. And so then we have index is less than array.length. Well, that's synonymous to current index is less than names.length. So let's turn this to names.length. Cool. And then we have index plus plus. Well, that's, I was doing plus 2, plus equal 1. But that's this one right here. And honestly, I don't do plus equal if I can just do plus plus. So this is us doing plus plus right there. So this whole for loop is setting up it sets up the initialization, and then it also has the condition to check, and then it has the incrementing. So each iteration is going to run what's in between these curly brackets, just like the while loop, each iteration it ran between the curly brackets. So here we can get an element from names, like that. We have our element, and now we can just console.log our element. And you'll see, next load the card gets printed out again, because the while loop did it this one, and then this one. The for loop did it. So what you do in a for loop, or what you can do in a while loop, you can do in a for loop. What you do in a for loop, you can do in a while loop. Cool. All right. So got that all packaged up, and the last thing we want to cover today is functions, right? And so what are functions? Well, functions will just help us group these lines of commands, all these commands into like one package, and then we can use that package multiple times if we need to. And so let's just create a real simple function that says, well, all it's going to do is it's going to accept a variable called name, and it's just going to print that name to the screen, right? And so we're going to have this function that's defined like this. So you can define functions multiple ways. You probably see it like something like function, like that. And then basically, so this is saying function right here is kind of like saying let or const, and then you got to give it your name. Well, what do we want to call this one? We're going to call this one print name. And functions, you typically give descriptive names, just like our variables, but these names are action names. So you see the first word usually is an action. So here is print. Functions are actions. So you have like the first word is typically an action name or action word. So this is print name. So someone says call the function print name, you know that that's an action that's probably going to print the name to the screen, right? And so you have this params value because you can pass in data. And so our data that we're going to pass in, when someone calls our function, they're going to pass in some data. We don't know what that data is. We know that the data is going to be a string, but that string can be Nate, it could be Tom, it could be Christian, it could be Slow. So we don't know what that data exactly is. So we're going to give a reference to that data and just call it a name. We're going to call it input name, right? Let's just call it input name. And so now inside of print name, what we can do is do a console.log, and we'll do a log, and we'll say the name the user input is, and then we'll do the $, and then we will say input name like that. And so now we have this function called print name. And what happens when we refresh the page? Well, let me actually take these flow controls off real quick. And so we refresh the page and nothing happens, but I have this function called print name. Well, what happens is all I did here was define this function. This is just a definition of a function, right? This is like me saying, let names, or let my name equal Nate. All right, this is the same thing as saying that all I did was define. So if I come back over here, Nate doesn't get printed out, right? It just doesn't until I say console.log, and then I say Nate. Or not, like, now I say console.log my name. All right, cool. So I have to console.log my name in order to get that value. Pretty much I'm just calling me, and so if I say my name like this is me calling my name, right? But my name doesn't get printed out. Like, I can call my name like this, and it doesn't get printed out because it just says Nate. We need to do something with Nate. So I say Nate, and then I pass it into this console, and it gets printed to the screen. Well, with a function, I don't have to pass it to the screen. I could just call it by his name, like print name like this. And we know a print name is a function. So with all functions, they all end with these parentheses. Whenever you want to call on a function, you end it with the parentheses. Just before we had my name is Nate, and whenever I wanted to call my name, I just say my name. If I wanted to change the value or something in my name, if I wanted to grab the value of my name, I just call my name and I get that value back. Like, that'll say Nate, but it wouldn't print it out. It would just say literally Nate. It will take line 41 for me to call my name, which would say Nate, and then console.log would grab that Nate data and then log that to the screen. Okay, well, with print name, we do print name like this. This is us calling on the function. And so, as you can see, Visual Studio Code is helping us out. It said, hey, we need an input. And that we need an input name to this function, and so we got to pass in a variable for the input name. And so I'll just say, I'll just go Nate. And now what you will see is, I refresh the name, or I refresh the page. You see the name the user input is Nate. Where does that come from? That comes from here, right? And so not only can I do that once, but I can do it multiple times, right? So Kari, slope. The name the user input, Nate. The name the user input, the card. The name the user input, slope. That's dope, right? How about we try something even doper? Let's try to call, instead of calling these 3 different times like this, what if I made an array of names, called it const names? I think I did that already, somewhere up here. Const names, right here. Yep, I did const names. What if I wanted to print out all these names? What if I wanted to print out or call print name for all of these names? Well, let's do a for loop. Let's mix some stuff that we already learned together. Let's do a for loop on top of names. Oh no. Okay. Do a for loop, and this should be array, and this should be names, and cool. Yep. And we got our index. So now what we can do is say print name, and then we just pass in. Let's call this one current name, and then we can pass in the variable current name. And now let's look. Let me take this one off. I come back over here and I refresh. All right, I don't know why I select slope with green, but it did. All right, so as you can see, I ended up just creating a name array, combined the for loop, and combine my function with a variable that's set to a string, right? We just combined pretty much everything that we just learned into one thing. And so what if I wanted to combine that part into a function? I can call this function, I can create a function called, I can create another function called print names. And so I'm gonna create this function how I typically create functions, which is like variables and print names. This is a new new school way of creating functions, and you set it equal to the anonymous function, right? And this anonymous functions look like this. And so it's pretty much the same thing. You got the parameter list, and then you got your arrow, and then the curly brackets, like that. And so the code goes in between the curly brackets. The parameters go right here. And I'm gonna say input names because it's gonna be multiple names. And what we want to do is just go here and put this right here, and we got input names instead of names. That's our data now, is input names. We're based off of this instead of this. And so now print names, because input names can be, not only is it going to be, we're going to pass this one in, but we could also pass multiple different, we could also pass like another array that had like Tom or something at the end, or Tim at the end, or something like that. You feel me? And so that's cool. So let's refresh the page and see what happens now. Nothing. Why did nothing happen? It's because we never called on print names. So let's call on print names. Calling on print names says that we need a input names. Input names is going to be our names array right here. We call it print name. Bang. What do you know? Got it all up with just one function. And so this function right here combines everything that we just learned. We created a function, but we created an arrow function. I like to call them anonymous functions, but a lot of people call them arrow functions. And we created an arrow function, and we set it equal to this variable called print names. Print names is now referring to an arrow function. It points to an arrow function. So whenever I call on print name, it's going to go to that bucket, and in that bucket is going to have a function, and it's going to run that function. And it's going to say this function needs some input. It needs an array of names. And so we have to give it an array of names. That array of names could be anything. It takes in the array of names, and it calls the array of names, what is it called, the array of names? It calls the array of names, input names, and its definition to make it like a consistent variable, right? You're not actually calling on the actual data that's passed in. You're calling on this variable that's referring to the data that will be passed in when it's passed in. Got you. Got it. I know that's a little complicated, but that's that. So, but on some real though, I got JavaScript. That is JavaScript. That is the basics of JavaScript. Like getting into like the syntax and whatnot. Like that's the basics of the syntax of JavaScript. Next, what we're going to do is actually tap into using JavaScript on the front end, using it to do things that most people don't know how to do yet. But you need to get this language down so that you can communicate between your HTML pages and your CSS and your JavaScript. Now that you have this knowledge down, I'm glad you went through this. Now you got this knowledge down, we are able to tap into a lot of vanilla.js websites that we're going to create together. Now, remember to always follow your boy, add me on the ground, do all of that. I'm getting y'all right with these videos. I'm going to see y'all in the next video. Let me know how I did in this video. JavaScript in 50 minutes. I got y'all. Peace.